Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman's much-anticipated reunion took place outside of WWE, and many responded notably. Triple H, the Game Chief Content Officer, also wrote the two a note after their sudden arrival earlier this. Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman hugged year. During XL WrestleMania before the first, Chief from a Tribe went on hiatus after the terrible defeat in Philadelphia. The Wiseman was left with no tribal chief to mentor and finally was compelled to labor for alone. Cena recently, Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman came together outside of WWE when the two showed up simultaneously on Bloomberg's Power Players. The two underlined different subjects of general interest, and supporters were glad to see the tribe chief meet with his smart men today. Chief Triple H, the contents officer, responded to the reunion and sent the pair a note. The King of Kings had great compliments on the original tribal chief and his wizened while they were away from the weekly goods and eagerly anticipated what they might had scheduled over the next few months. Effect of generational superstars like at WWE Roman Reigns and brilliant ideas like at Heyman Hustle have on all. Corporate is very infinite at WWE is continuously seeking for toward future directions, and what is next will, in particular, Hunter wrote. Roman Reigns hasn't crossed paths with Paul Heyman on earlier today WWE programming. Year alone, Cena made Paul Heyman obliged to become his Wiseman after kicking Jimmy out of the Bloodline. USO Paul Heyman was helpless and proceeded at the moment and trying to do as he instructed in coming months along. Cena included risky guys to the organization. Mon objected against it. Still, the Wise Men's Council came on deaf ears, and the declared tribe chief listened in no interest at all. Later on Friday Night SmackDown, to him, Paul Heyman sought to solicit assistance from CM Punk to flee from C's alone. Still, the scheme fell short, and the Wise Men accompanied the lineage only. However, solo Cena crossed the line when he consumed Roman Reigns. Alpha instructed Mon to pay him respect as he is. The Wise Men turned away from tribe chief, got fiercely assaulted by C's warriors. It's months, and Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman haven't crossed paths on weekly TV showed the two together backstage during SummerSlam 2024, but live still to come is appearance as a whole. Triple H stood in his own office, hands on his hips, fixed on his phone. As a warning show up on the, he had recently completed a conference on screens. Speak with WWE's creative crew on the following months of narratives when the notice came through it not in written form or an email from anybody working at WWE was a post on social media. One would already established the wrestling scene ablaze. Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman had initially been seen together recent months, but not at a WWE event. The two had reconciled outside of the business in personal environment, and the internet was frenzy with conjecturality. Triple H sank back in his chair, zooming over the pictures. Videos shot by supporters. Roman and Heyman were seated at a fancy restaurant, gazing deeply. Though it was a laid-back occasion, chatting it was. The ramifications were not at all what they seemed. Triple H's thoughts changed straight away. Based on the present situation of WWE, Roman had adopted a reduced schedule. After his successful stint as undisputed champion, focusing more on his family-specific activities, Heyman had remained behind, still coordinating with WWE and participating in few backstage passages, but his presence felt as if a chess piece taken from the board, awaiting the proper timing to go back. Now, with these Roman pictures and Mon flowing resemble, one thing was developing. Triple H were aware of the relevance of perspective in this business. What supporters saw outside the arena was as important as what they saw. He laughed at the last one these days. Outlets like to stir the kettle, but in this case they weren't totally incorrect. Reconciliation between Reigns and Mon would rock the sector with shock waves. And should it take place outside of WWE, may produce. Just then, a knock on his door causes issues. Office door cut off his IDs. Visit Triple H under establishing his phone out of tune. Lindsay McMahon intervened. Her brow wrinkled noticeably upon hearing the same news you saw from the picture sheet. Question crossing her arms. Triple G nodded. I saw them all across the planet. Seen them by now. Stephanie moaned as she was taking. Do you suppose it's a seat across from him? Anything about which we should be concerned? He shrugged, bending forward. It's difficult to. Roman's been doing his own thing for a while back. He was still under contract. Why should he be speaking with Mon outside of WWE? May indicate they are organizing stuff else. It may only be two elderly buddies keeping up whilst aware of those. Do nothings are never really casual. Stephanie completed his idea. Triple H perfectly tapped his fingers on the desk, and if Roman's plans, his next action, we need, must be ready for several months. WWE had been undergoing, gingerly negotiating its post-Roman terrain include Cody, Rhodes, and Seth. Rollins rising as elite performers and fresh talent like a Knight starting to take hold. The lack of Roman's presence had not, as much as they first thought, hurt. Yet a comeback, particularly one involving Paul Heyman, was able to change the dynamics in surprising approaches. Stephanie inclined her head to examine her husband. Do you believe Roman is thinking about bidding farewell? In other words, whether they are fulfilling outside WWE, there's a possibility. I don't believe Roman's going anyplace. Triple H interrupted. He is too clever for that. He understands WWE is where he will create the most influence, yet he might be looking at to rework his narrative. He may desire to return on his own terms instead than the ones we have been establishing. Paul lingered in between them as they both considered the viable cases. Roman had been a master from always, strategically, both inside and outside the ring. He understood how to make use of his position. Therefore, the mystique of the bloodline to keep supporters on alert for a reunion with Mon, specifically in relation to this abrupt meeting, might be the initial step towards an object. Monumental considerations demand our attention to the remainder of the roster. Stephanie remarked. If Roman and Mon break the quiet, decided to realign, it transforms everything. The locker room dynamics, the plot threads. We have been creating it and could lead to cascade effect. Triple H nodded in accordance with accord for which I must be ahead of this. I will get in touch with Mon. C. Given any what's actually happening type of scheme developing between them, I want for knowing about that. You believe Heyman will inform you the truth? Stephanie asked, for eyebrow conscious of how elusive Heyman may be when he laughed at Triple H's request. Heyman will most likely speak the truth because send me 3 separate narratives before breakfast, but at least I'll have a feeling of where his head is at. Rising, Triple H went for his phone once again, scanning more fan. Already, remarks of conjecture were prevalent, worrying if Roman would go back to recover his kingdom, or if this indicated regarding a power battle he is engaged in with WWE managers. I will mention one thing, Triple H whispered, looking at Stephanie. This is the traditional Roman, always retaining everyone. Estimating. Stephanie gave a weak grin. That's what gave the bloodline plot such resonance. Successful volatility. Triple H fired a 3-hour shot, knowing, look, now we have to find out how we may once again make it work for us. Roman's too priceless to let slip away. He scheduled a big comeback. I want to beat portion of it. Nevertheless, it makes logical. For the supporters as well as for us, he stood.